In the depths of the library of never-ending stories is a chronicle of the battles between hope and despair. Within the tomes of this ancient archive are stories and secrets not yet revealed, but with each adventure, a new chapter is written. So ruler, awaken and journey into. Nero had leaned against the carriage window, hoping to rest his eyes. The interior was humid, yet the upholstery and curtains decorating the living space were in impeccable condition, showing no trace of being the innards of a demon. That's why when the smell shifted to dry paper and stale air, he found it strange. He stretched carefully, avoiding touching anyone or anything, and opened his eyes. He was back in the library. The shock made him fall to the floor. There had been no seat to hold his body, so gravity, even within his dream, did its job. I must have fallen asleep. And though he waited for Scheherazade's voice to answer, none came. The library was completely empty. No presence, no movement. For the first time, the dream seemed to belong entirely to him. It's possible this is because I'm aware I'm dreaming, he said, beginning to slow walk through the aisles of the library. The rows were tidy now, a change from the last time he dreamt of the place, though the shelves' arrangement appeared random, and the spines of the books displayed their titles. But he couldn't read them. Whenever he tried to focus, the letters blurred violently, forcing him to look away. But one among all the volumes caught his attention. He pulled it free and opened it to a random page. It was heavy. The pages trembled before his eyes, and the letters began to take shape, allowing him to read their contents. The book told of the battle fought at the Bloodfire battlefield of Yomagard. The content was identical to the story Professor Bazena told him, the tale of the fight between the archdemon Varkuzal and the goddess Velmar. But with one crucial difference. The book was written in first person, and the narrator was unmistakably him. The book described the battle of the Bloodfire battlefield of Yomagard, yes, but Varkuzal's name was nowhere to be found. In the narrative, it was Nero who had risen from the depths of Yomagard to destroy the realm's inhabitants, Nero who had dueled the goddess Velmar endlessly, and Nero who had ultimately been dismembered and decapitated. Nero dropped the book in panic. The shelves began to stretch upward, twisting as the entire library distorted into a spiraling abyss, dragging Nero into an endless fall. A loud thud jolted Nero awake, and he leapt up, slamming his head against the carriage ceiling. Groaning, he fell back into his seat, rubbing the sore spot. What was that? Nero was still disoriented. Probably ran over some demon. Symphony was indifferent. She was peering out of the window as if the view wasn't complete darkness. Lorinka was still asleep, as she had been moments ago, resting against the other window under a blanket. Axburin, with its volcanic activity even underground, had brutal, cold nights. Nero looked around for another blanket until Symphony shot him a meaningful glare that clearly said, "Stop bothering me." Defeated, he wrapped himself into his academy jacket, curling up with his knees against his chest. Why us, Sif? Nero was shivering, his nose clearly frozen. Excuse me, what did you just call me? Her cheeks were beginning to turn red. I thought, well, since we're not classmates anymore, we could speak a little bit more casually? I guess sorry if that bothered you. Don't you ever call me that again. Understood. Several minutes of awkward silence followed. Nero missed Flute's chatter. She had vanished, since they'd been told they wouldn't be taking part in her interdimensional conflict anymore. But the silence was odd, considering they had discovered quite suddenly that the poor girl had a lot to say, and had never had anyone to say it to before. She told them about her childhood, her captivity under a powerful sorcerer, the time she'd spent as part of the High Goddess Kaguya's consciousness, and many other things, each more unbelievable than the last. That's why the total silence now felt so strange. He tried calling her in thought, but nothing happened. Flute manifested when and where she pleased, and it was entirely possible she had stayed behind in the Academy's laboratory instead of joining them on this strange journey. Look, I chose you. You two are necessity. Only a necessity, said Symphony. Necessity? Nero's eyes suddenly lit up. Having someone rely on him filled him with satisfaction. Yes, King Valgot didn't exactly request your help. He requested mine. But as you know, I'm a prodigy in runic magic, and my talents haven't gone unnoticed. His Majesty entrusted me with a mission to retrieve the flower called Ambrosia, and demanded that I bring 2 other warlocks with me, the most capable and willing of my class, to protect me if necessary while I fulfill my duties. And you thought of me? It really shouldn't surprise you. I've seen you use your magic. You're quick, instinctive, you hold your own, and you hide far more power than you show. Nero raised his eyebrow, puzzled. Look, don't bother denying it. I placed a measuring glyph on you. I know you're 3 times more powerful than any other student in our class. Nero swallowed hard. He didn't really know what to say. He wasn't hiding his magic power in truth. He had no secret to keep, except for Flute's existence. Flute, he thought. Could Symphony have been referring to her magic power and not his own? It was an interesting theory, but he couldn't test it. Not without revealing that Flute existed, and especially not without knowing if she was even there to ask for her guidance. And her. Symphony pointed at Larinka. I chose her because it was the easiest way to get to you, and I know you two are close friends. So if I convinced her, you'd surely come along. Was I wrong? Well, no. I mean, you're right, but not about my hiding power. I'm as transparent as the dew on this window. Nero began running a finger down the glass, leaving a wet streak. You mean you, a half-demon, child of 2 worlds, the only one whose pact with the demon doesn't turn him into a monster, hide nothing? That would be amusing, really. But if you don't want to talk, that's fine. I don't need your secrets. Just your usefulness for this mission. And what does His Majesty want with a flower? Nero began pulling his jacket tighter around himself to shield himself from the cold. You don't need to know. You have your secrets, I have mine. I don't have... You know what? Never mind. Think what you want to think. Nero sat closing his eyes and curling up further into his clothes. If he wasn't going to have a rational conversation, he might as well try and sleep. Something soft but heavy hit his face and chest. Nero caught it on reflex. It was a folded blanket. Symphony had pulled a second one from a compartment under the seats and tossed it at him. Nero spread it over his legs and wrapped the other end around his shoulders, and warmth began to seep back into his body. A long while then passed. The only sounds were the wheels grinding on the axles, Larinka's heavy breathing, and Symphony's occasional sighs. Nero hadn't managed to fall asleep yet, but he kept his eyes closed, still trying. Eventually, curiosity got the better of him, as it always did. So, am I the most powerful warlock in our class? Asked Nero, breaking the silence. No, that would be me. You're the second most powerful, said Symphony with a proud look. Huh. Nero was genuinely surprised. Look, I don't understand it either. You barely practice magic, you've never taken a mission before this, you have no special traits, and you haven't even made any additional demon packs, which honestly shocks me. You should be ordinary, and yet the readings of your aura shatter every metric. Symphony was clearly irritated, but Nero stayed silent. Professor Bazane had already exposed him by revealing that it was possible to make pacts with more than one demon, but he hadn't explained the conditions. and he wasn't about to let Symphony know that he didn't understand that part either. But she was much sharper. After a few seconds of not getting an answer, she connected the dots. Her eyes widened, and she kicked under her blanket and almost stood up, only the carriages swayed to stop her. Come on, don't fuck with me, seriously. What kind of idiot are you that you know nothing? But I did know, said Nero defensively. Since when? 2 days ago? No, you found that out today? Holy shit. Nero didn't know what to say. Apparently he was transparent, but in the worst way possible. Professor Pizzane told me, yeah. Trying to sound innocent. Right. Anyway, yes, you can make pacts with more than one demon. In fact, you should, if possible, as long as the first pact allows it. And archdemons only permit pacts with their other subordinates or with other archdemons of similar rank. Either our class is one of the best there's ever been, or the archdemons are desperate, since they're the only ones insisting on more pacts, using dream magic to reach out to warlocks, letting them sign pacts into their nightmares. I've signed 3 myself. One with Moloch, one with Python, and the last with your patron, Baroost. At the mention of the archdemon's names, the carriage trembled. Larinka stirred and turned over in her sleep. Her too? Yeah, additional pacts don't require new sacrifices if the first one demanded a sufficiently intense payment. Symphony saw Nero looking at Larinka with pity and added, she has 3 as well. Some archdemons gladly accept the souls of relatives. Now that you know, have you thought about expanding? You're already strong, but if you don't know how to truly harness your magic, the support of other patrons wouldn't hurt. Yeah, I'll pass. You'll fall too. Nero shook his head. He was steadfast. His first pact had been an accident, and he didn't need to repeat or perpetuate it by making new ones. Besides, Symphony's suggestion worried him. The archdemons might be nervous about something, and if beings as powerful as them were afraid of something, that something or someone had to be even stronger than all of them combined. Only one name came to Nero's mind. Varkuzal. The carriage once again seemed to react and braked hard, skidding several meters. Everything inside shook violently. The 3 of them had to grab onto whatever they could find to avoid being thrown around. Their meager luggage, unsecured, scattered everywhere, hitting them at random. And when it was over, the 3 of them were on the carriage floor, tangled up in painfully awkward positions. What was that? Larinka tried getting up. Her feet were sticking out of the shattered window, and her face was pressed into the carpet. I don't know, said Symphony, pushing Nero off of her. She had ended up sitting on the floor with Nero collapsed on top. Ugh, should we get out? Symphony nodded. She grabbed her staff and jumped out through the other door. Nero rolled out after her, jumping to his feet. He still had the blanket wrapped around his shoulders like a cape. Strangely, the outside temperature was much higher than during the journey, so he tossed the blanket aside and drew his wand. They were in a vast field. The ground was black and cracked as if salt had been poured over it after harvest. No wind blew, and no footsteps could be heard. A yellowish fog prevented them from seeing more than 5 meters ahead. There were fallen, charred trees, fractured stones, and all around them an armor that had once been silver, now dressing the skeletons of what were once humans. Nero recognized the place. He had read about it in his last dream, or in his nightmare. Oh wow, this is the Bloodfire battlefield. We shouldn't have stopped. There were no breaks scheduled on this route, said Symphony. What is this place? It reeks, said Larinka. Larinka's keen cook's nose was right again. The place stank of death and decay, but beneath it all lurked an even worse smell, sulfur. And then Nero noticed them. Demons. And lots of them. Larinka was pointing past the carriage. Look. The ground began to shake, as if an army were approaching, and soon the first creatures emerged from the fog. They were bipedal, but ran on all fours using their arms and legs. They had long manes and massive horns jutting from their foreheads. Their bodies were red, earthy in some places, crimson in others, and there were too many to count. They were charging straight at them. "It's a stampede," shouted Nero. "Quick, get back in the carriage. I'll hold them off," said Symphony, rolling up her sleeves. "Alone? How?" "The same way you control any pack of animals. By subjugating the largest one," said Symphony. Nero and Larinka obeyed. After all, Symphony was the leader of their mission. She focused on the largest demon at the front of the charge and conjured a flaming glyph between her hands. Spirals of fire fell upon the chosen demon, surrounding it and anchoring its hind legs to the ground. Beneath it, glowing waves began to spread, a sign that the glyph had worked. The demon rose and howled. The rest slowed at the sight of one of their leaders trapped, but soon continued their rush, dodging both it and the waves beneath its feet. "Shit, didn't work," said Symphony under her breath. "Quick, get in, Sif!" shouted Nero, who had jumped out again. He pulled her toward the carriage, but the demons were already upon them, and they passed them by, leaping over and around the carriage itself. Nero managed to drag Symphony inside just before the impacts tipped it over. Since the demons weren't ramming it, but avoiding it, they seemed safe for now. "I don't get it," said Symphony. "I trapped the biggest one. They saw it. They should have stopped." "I think the mistake is assuming they were running toward something, Sif," said Larinka. Symphony glared at her for using the nickname, but Larinka stuck her tongue out, softening the tension. "They were running away, and when you're running away, it doesn't matter what's ahead. What matters is what's behind you." They climbed toward the upper door, now on top since the carriage had been overturned, and exited through what used to be the side door, but now it was the roof. "Shit, you were right. They were running from that," said Symphony. A gigantic demon, several meters tall, strode across the wasteland, lighting up everything through the fog. It was a flaming skeleton with 7 pairs of twisted horns sprouting from its skull, and one more centered between its hollow eye sockets. Every bone ended in a sharpened point, honed like blades. The demon dragged a cart made of metal and bone, also ablaze. From within, it burst streams of fire, filled with once living souls now suffering eternal torment, trapped within the creature. But worst of all, the demon hurled flaming skulls across the wasteland, and those skulls flew, chasing other demons. When the skulls reached the demon Symphony had trapped, they devoured it mercilessly, tearing its flesh and splintering its bones. "Come out!" The demon's voice was like a lightning strike in a dry forest, splitting a tree in half. Nero felt the urge to answer the call, but it wasn't meant for them. It was summoning the souls it dragged behind. Flames of spirits burst from the rear of the demon, raining down upon the wasteland like fire. And soon they reformed, becoming the same kind of demons they had seen before. "It wasn't a stampede of demons fleeing, it's a hunt." "We have to do something," said Nero, unable to look away from the cart. Something within the flames was whispering his name so faintly that only he could hear it. "Do what? It's demons killing each other. What we have to do is stay put until they're gone. This has nothing to do with us." "No, that's not true. Can't you hear them? The damned? The ones who died here? They're screaming. Terrified. This place is scarred and it's cursed. We shouldn't have come. But we can't change that now. We have to preserve their memory." Nero was insistent. Before his friends could react, he jumped from the carriage, wand in hand. And first he scattered the flaming skulls, attacking the remains of the trapped demon by conjuring chains of fire through a glyph he had never seen before, yet came to his mind as if he had known it forever. Then he traced another fiery glyph in the air, marking every nearby demon's forehead with a red symbol that forced them to turn on each other. How is he doing that? Said Larinka, mouth agape. I don't know. And even seeing it with my own eyes, I still can't believe he's doing it. Nero wielded the wand like a conductor's baton. The demons, even those that were flame spirits, burned, exploded, twisted in agony. Around Nero, spirals of fire and cracking blue lightning swirled. The demons stood no chance, no matter how many there were. But such a display of power caught the attention of the massive demon. It hunched forward, grinning wickedly, and charged, carrying the cart straight toward Nero. We have to help him, but Symphony grabbed her arm, shaking her head. How? Can't you see? We'd only get in the way, said Symphony. Her knuckles were white from how tightly she was gripping her staff, and she hated admitting it. What do you mean? Said Larinka. If he's pushed to the edge, we intervene. If not, let him act. But Nero's in danger. I think if we step into his line of sight, he might destroy us, too, said Symphony, and Larinka went pale. As much as she hated it, Symphony was right. Nero was screaming, overwhelmed by emotions he couldn't control. He was euphoric. His magic poured out like a torrent, powerful, chaotic, and deadly. At the same time, from his distant lair, the archdemon Barus summoned a glyph between his skeletal fingers. Without them realizing, the archdemon's mark appeared in both girls' eyes. Barus watched closely all that befell the warlocks who had signed his book, granting them power when needed. But his expression was darker than usual, for he knew it wasn't him fueling Nero's power. He tried to control the boy, but he couldn't. Something ancient, something darker than even himself was flowing through Nero's veins. And furious, Barus made his entire chamber explode.